Welcome, my name is Abel Mithers, and in this video I will try to break down the Coppa Italia 2022 final between Juventus and Inter from tactical perspective. So just looking at the lineups, I will talk about what Allegri was trying to do with this lineup and what were some of the ideas for Inzaghi. I think the most important things here is for Inzaghi is to try to control the pace of the game regardless of what his lineup is, use some of the positional rotations to get beyond the pressing line of Juve or even the mid block if they will defend that way, and then occasionally find the overloads on the wide side, drop the center forwards to access them, and arrive into the final third with advantages, whether that will be for Perisic as a winger or just numerical or dynamical superiorities in transition. Obviously, key for the midfield trio to free itself with rotations or just individual efforts, and then try to take advantage of how Juventus will set up. And in that case, we'll see Allegri chose a kind of 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1 with Dybala will be the man against Brozovic. Two wide players with Bernardeschi and Quadrado, who are not really known for their defense. And then you have a double pivot of Zakaria and Rabiot, who are very proficient athletically and can do a lot of running and transition, but perhaps not. Neither of them is really a deep lying playmaker, although Zakaria can be that way, but isn't used that way for Juve. So in that sense, Juventus's match plan is much more clear to play in transitions. They will not have the ball so much with this lineup and try to get Vlahovic as the target man in the rare possession phases, and obviously support him by Dybala as a creator on the right half space mostly, and then obviously using the dribblers wide and then the double pivot to gain transition. They need to be aggressive in defending those jumps by Lautaro and Dzeko with the center backs and Chiellini and De Ligt particularly, who's very good at them. And then, but need to keep the fullbacks deep so that they need to take advantage of. So they need to control. They could not be taken advantage of Perisic and like. And then they also need to keep track of Handanović's distribution. So we'll talk about 4 points here, key points. The Inter's early plans against the pressing scheme, and then talk about Juventus's issues with, particularly in Dybala, and then some of the mistakes and structural issues that they had, and then how Juve's kind of changes for the better and how they were able to use Bernardeschi and Dybala to generate some chances and really probably could have gone in ahead or tied. And then Inter's targets against Dybala, and then the substitutions for Danilo, and then that's changing the game towards Perisic's favor. So Inter has structural superiorities in a lot of places, which isn't that surprising. But Brozovic in a deeper role, and then you have Dzeko in this midfield diamond, and Juventus very struggled because here Darmian is keeping Alexandro, so they can't really defend here. With Bernardeschi needs to stay deeper with D'Ambrosio, so there could be a way for Inter to play through here in these lines. Similarly, they can also find these overloads on the right side where all three of their central midfielders are on here with support from central side center back in D'Ambrosio, and then also in between the lines. So it's interesting that Inter had all these superiorities and really scored on a long range shot by Barella, and then this is another scheme that they had, is again taking advantage of sort of Juventus's wide midfielders not defending so well in Quadrado. It's basically a Perisic ball where you have a deeper, most intense spot Lautaro, and he could make a run once Dzeko lays it off into him, and you get Çalhanoğlu pinning the right back. So talked about how Inter wants to build out of the back at all costs, and obviously Brozovic is not one of the few people in the world who will just consistently ask for the ball under pressure and deliver and spring the center back, and in this case, De Vrij, who had some issues in terms of the tempo and executing these passes. Zakaria made a very good interception here, but as you'll see here, they also used D'Ambrosio in almost like a fullback, wingback role, and in those cases, you've seen it from Dumfries in his half space, but Darmian was very, very attacking in his role when Inter had possession. I'll show you something on that a little bit later when we get to the end of the video of the differences in positioning when they had the ball and when they didn't. But they also had a plan to exit with lowered wing backs. So in this case, it's very much from what Conte used to do, is lower the wing back, diagonal ball right to the 10, and then laying it off and then finding the other striker. So that's a very common scheme, and they were able to arrive into the final third, but not really get so much out of it. And this is one where Brozovic gets away from Dybala, is beyond him, and then using Handanovic's distribution, lots of width, and then you have central options here with the three. So a lot of times Juventus would end up 4v4 in the back, and their defenders centrally needed to defend forward a lot. Chiellini won all of his duels against Dzeko, and that was one key factor why they were able to keep Inter really to not much other than the Barella goal in the first half. Just some great examples of Brozovic here, just the ultimate guy who can free himself and disc mark. I mean, the way he got away from Dybala, and Dybala initially tried to maintain the man marking, but it was fairly easy to get rid of, and obviously it's hard when you go up against the best in the world in Brozovic. So let's talk about Juventus, what they wanted to do without the ball, which is have a sort of 4-4-2 that can shift in some ways, and 4-2-3-1 sometimes. Here you see Dybala marking Brozovic, and then you have the 8, Zakaria, or the 6s if you like to call them, on the Inter 8, Barella and Hakan Çalhanoğlu, and then you've got the ball for wide player is always tucking into this spot here where Inter like to drop one of their central forwards, and so they will try to generate some turnovers. Very few of them they were able to do it because Inter is such a good ball possession team, but unfortunately for Juve, when they did it, they missed that ball for midfielder like Alexandro in this case. So this flexible out of possession shape, you can get some man orientations, you can try to have good timing so that you defend forward, but Inter would often have one of the center backs free. And I talked about how not having a left-footed center back here in the starting lineup hurt Inter because there wasn't that much progression, and D'Ambrosio was much more a threat when he was deeper. But that actually would have changed with DeMarco's introduction in the second half. So one other thing is Handanovic's role. We talked about how Juve needed to be aware of him as a distributor. So how Inter like to invite this double 6, so Zakaria and Rabiot. And you can actually see Rabiot motioning to Zakaria to come up to Brozovic because he's dismarked himself from Dybala. And then that will arrive Inter to send Çalhanoğlu and actually have a 3. Almost 3 of them are in the middle, but certainly Çalhanoğlu, who will receive the ball, is free, and then they give a 4v4 but aren't able to get much out of it. But certainly just talk about how Inzaghi had much better plans, I would say, and then Allegri's some of the plans I didn't really like in terms of people occupying the same zones here as well, the U-shape. And then defensively as well, very easy to play through the lines, not much pressure on the ball sometimes. So it's interesting that you actually got better, I would say, right after the goal, but particularly after about 20 minutes. And they began to have the ball more in this 3+1 where Dybala would drop and they would have some of the runners, particularly Zakaria, Cuadrado, and Bernardeschi overloading on the right side. And here's a good example of how they want to access Vlahovic with Dybala as a decoy. So he's the one who drops back and makes Skriniar come with him, and then you could play in Zakaria here, but they'll access Vlahovic. And note Bernardeschi's position here in the half space, which is okay, but I think you would like him to be deeper. So here's the play they will go with, which is Cuadrado going deep. But I said here that you'd like to have Bernardeschi here, so you could have more of an impact here, perhaps get it back from this pass to Zakaria. But he's not really doing that much here on this weak side where he's so deep. But I actually want to praise Bernardeschi for when he's an option receiving the ball under pressure. So here's the 3+1 again. Dzeko is a little bit late, even though Chiellini is not in a great receiving position, but Dzeko doesn't contest too well. So Bernardeschi can receive, and immediately he has D'Ambrosio and beats him with this really, really nice turn and leaves the pressure. And then he has basically Vlahovic, who can run in between two center backs, but doesn't execute the pass well enough. Some more issues I mentioned with Juve is, again, not having a playmaking center back. That won't be until Bonucci comes in. So Chiellini isn't really able to execute any of these sort of more advanced passes or any sort of riskier ones. He's very safe. His body positioning is sometimes wrong, so he can't really turn this way and could just make easy passes, and he's just becomes too safe with the ball. But it's also Juve's structure is not ideal here, the three center backs, and then not really having any sort of connecting player here for you who you could play off to. And then perhaps too much on this weak side of players who are not really able to be accessed quickly. So Inter can just shift across. So having that said, that Juve did create two or three really good chances. 22nd minute with Dybala overloading, and then he gets a chance. And then obviously when I mentioned how Chiellini would beat Dzeko, and this was a huge chance for Vlahovic, where Handanovic made an amazing save. So either of these, you'd probably say Juve deserved to be at least level. And then finally, Inter were able to regain their control by more possession and then targeting Dybala a little bit. So I mentioned here how he starts out on Brozovic as the man marking, and you see this is a pretty man marking scheme with Handanovic having the ball. And then you'll see Dybala kind of turning his way and putting a little bit of pressure, but immediately Brozovic began to dismark and get away. And he identifies the space because here's Barella and Çalhanoğlu, who are covered by Zakaria and Rabiot, so you'll see that he can get into here. And then Handanovic has, of course, had 14 long passes that were accurate in the game, so it's no surprise that if you give him time, he'll just put in these passes almost like a pocket passing quarterback. And you see the rest of Juve's back line is pinned here by the two strikers, even though Lautaro's coming back, and then you've got Darmian, and then you have Perisic, who's wide threats, and you actually have Bernardeschi back, so that's why you can have room for Perisic in there. And actually, Skriniar would also try to take advantage of Dybala, and sometimes when Dybala would defend as the right forward, and then you'd have Brozovic marked by someone else like Rabiot. You'll see Skriniar here noticing that it's Dybala on him. He immediately begins to sprint, and then Handanovic again hits him with this really, really good pass. So yeah, that was another thing they did. And then overall, I mean, I talked about how Inter were the more aesthetic team and had more ideas, but they only had it with 4 shots for 0.13 xG, and Barella's long goal was the difference. And Juve actually had all 7 of their shots in the last 23 minutes for about half an xG. And you can see the heat map here is Juve, for the most part, often deep, but actually Inter will continue to push them deeper as the match progresses. And so the average positions, this is in possession. You can see Juve's shape, which is 4-2-3-1-ish with Dybala with the ball much more in the right half space, and against the ball he's much more. He will be against the ball. He'll be much more in this space as well. 4-4-1-1 almost against the ball, and then Inter's ball possession shape, it's almost a back 4 or basically a back 2, and then you have D'Ambrosio fairly high already in half space, and then Darmian is really, really high. Look at him, how he's up here when they have the ball, and then without the ball he's deep in almost a 5-3-2. And then that central midfield trio again, very, very similar. So yeah, that's the first half, and then I'll continue and come back with the second half, where Juventus would go and quickly turn the match around, and then some of the non-tactical issues would take over. So thank you very much for listening, and if you want to follow the content, I am at BundesPL on Twitter. This is Abel Mesarsch signing off with the first half of the Coppa Italia final.